You hear the phrase multi-billion-dollar logistics empire, and you probably picture, well, you picture something out of a science fiction film.
Right, like massive server farms.
Exactly. Massive climate-controlled server farms just humming perfectly in the dark.
Yeah.
You picture AI routing algorithms instantly calculating millions of variables, coordinating this synchronized dance of autonomous dispatch software across thousands of cities.
A perfectly oiled machine.
Right. But you don't picture a couple of exhausted college students sitting in a dorm room, aggressively refreshing a consumer app meant for finding lost iPhones, just so they can figure out where their driver is.
No, you definitely don't.
And you don't picture those same kids staring at a frozen bank account because a financial algorithm flagged them as a money laundering cartel.
Which is a very real thing that happened.
It did. And you certainly don't picture the fate of that entire empire coming down to a 10-second high-stakes debate over whether to fulfill an order for a single plate of pad thai or to just give up, admit defeat, and go get ice cream.
It's a jarring contrast. But that is the genuine naked origin of almost every dominant platform today.
Yeah.
The modern global tech ecosystem is basically built on a pervasive illusion.
How so?
Well, we are sold this sanitized narrative of the perfectly scaled machine. The myth that a brilliant piece of software is simply born, compiled, and turned on, and it just immediately services millions of users with zero friction.
Like magic.
Right. But the historical reality, the actual architecture of survival in those early days is intensely manual. It's deeply unglamorous, and often, frankly, it's humiliating.
It's a grind.
Total grind.
Yeah.
It is an exercise in doing things that fundamentally do not scale.
And that is the exact tension we are pulling apart today. So welcome to this deep dive. We are stripping away the corporate mythology to look at the messy, duct-taped origins of companies like DoorDash, Teespring, and Twitch.
The actual primary sources of how they survived.
Exactly. We are looking specifically at Lecture 8, How to Get Started, Doing Things That Don't Scale, and Press. We're going to figure out why doing things the quote-unquote wrong way, the painfully inefficient, unscalable way, is actually the only way to survive the birth of a company.
It's counterintuitive, but it's the absolute truth.
So whether you are building a startup from scratch, or maybe you're trying to force innovation inside a massive, sluggish corporation, or you just want to understand the hidden mechanics of the digital tools you use every day.
You really have to understand this dynamic.
You do. Because the instinct to be efficient is exactly what kills most new ideas.
It really is.
So let's start at the very bottom of the mountain, the sheer crushing weight of acquiring the very first user, and this psychological trap of what we call the dream solution.
Right. The dream solution is perhaps the most dangerous cognitive bias a founder can have.
Walk us through that. What is the dream solution?
Well, when you launch a new product, there is this overpowering fantasy that you can engineer a frictionless ascent.
You just want it to be easy.
Exactly. You look at established giants and you assume their current strategies should be your starting point. You desperately search for that perfect pay-per-click ad campaign that will yield like a 10-to-1 return on investment immediately.
Or you hunt for that magical partnership.
Oh, the silver bullet partnership.
Yeah, like an affiliate agreement where some massive distributor just blasts your product to their million-person mailing list and you wake up rich.
Right, but it's a trap. It's the desire to build a massive 10-lane concrete highway before you even know where the towns are.
I love that analogy.
You want the system to do the heavy lifting so you don't have to sweat. But looking at the early days of Teespring, the custom apparel platform their founder, Walker Williams, laid out a really harsh reality check about this.
Yeah, those scalable, automated acquisition strategies on day one, they assume you already know exactly what the market wants.
And you don't. You know absolutely nothing on day one.
Nothing.
Williams noted that for the vast majority of companies, those dream solutions are unicorns. They just do not exist at Genesis.
So what's the alternative?
Your first users are going to be impossibly hard to get. Pursuing an automated strategy is fundamentally unsustainable because building that 10-lane highway is useless if the commuters actually want to travel in the opposite direction.
Let's look at the physical reality of what Williams described here, because he talked about the early days of Teespring in 2012 as an objectively terrible business.
Oh, terrible. By any standard metric.
If an MBA student looked at their input to output ratio, they would have told them to liquidate immediately.
Without a doubt.
To sell just 50 T-shirts for a local nonprofit, which generated a grand total of maybe $1,000 in revenue?
Barely enough to keep the lights on.
Barely. But for that $1,000, the founders were putting in days, sometimes weeks, of manual labor.
They were doing face-to-face meetings.
Face-to-face meetings. They were doing the custom design work for the client for free. They were doing endless rounds of revisions, launching the products on the platform themselves, and manually running the social media campaigns just to squeeze out a few sales.
Let's just break down the sheer inefficiency of that for a second.
Please.
If you are spending 100 hours of highly skilled engineering and design time to generate $1,000 in gross revenue.
Which isn't even profit.
Right, gross revenue. Your hourly rate is effectively below minimum wage. You are operating at a massive loss of human capital. From a pure accounting perspective, it's a disaster.
Which naturally makes me want to push back on this entire philosophy.
Okay, let's hear it.
As someone who constantly looks for operational leverage, if a strategy is that unscalable, if you are burning yourself out for pennies, why do it at all? Doesn't that instill terrible habits in your early team?
It seems like it would.
Doesn't it condition you to accept low margins and high friction forever?
I would actually argue it conditions you for survival.
How so?
The flaw in looking at that 100 hours as a loss is that you are measuring the wrong output.
Okay.
In those first few months, you are not manufacturing revenue. You are manufacturing intelligence.
That's a huge distinction.
It is. Just by virtue of the fact that your product is new, you are terrible at selling it. You have no idea what the real friction points are for the customer.
Because nobody's used it yet.
Exactly. You have no case studies. You have zero testimonials to prove you aren't just a scam. Doing things manually engaging in that brutal hand-to-hand combat to close a $1,000 deal that is the only mechanism available to gather the raw, unfiltered data required to eventually build the automated machine.
So you're buying data with your sweat.
You're paying for an education in your own market.
Okay, that reframes it entirely. The manual labor is actually a discovery phase masquerading as a sales process.
Yes.
You aren't just trying to move 50 shirts. You are walking through the forest with a machete to see where the natural footpaths form.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
You are figuring out why a nonprofit coordinator even wants a custom shirt in the first place.
Right. What are their anxiety levels regarding inventory? What specific words convince them to pull the trigger?
Precisely. You are absorbing the customer's psychology.
But there's a danger here, right?
A massive one.
Williams points out a critical caveat to this discovery phase. Doing things manually does not mean doing them for free.
No, it absolutely does not.
Because there is a massive temptation to just give the product away to secure those first users, right? Just to artificially inflate your user number so you feel like you're growing.
It's the easiest thing in the world to give something away for free. But cutting costs to zero is toxic.
Why?
You must ensure that users actually value the product. Because a user who gets something for free treats the software fundamentally differently than a user who has to pull out a credit card.
That makes total sense. A free user won't complain when it breaks. They'll just quietly abandon it.
Exactly. They have no skin in the game.
But someone who paid you $50, oh, they will write you a 3-paragraph email detailing exactly which button on your interface didn't work.
And that angry email is pure gold for a founder.
It is. And that actually brings us to a fascinating escalation. If Teespring represents the grinding manual labor of discovering the market, the origin story of DoorDash represents the tactical hacking of a hypothesis.
The DoorDash story is wild.
It really is. They took this unscalable philosophy and pushed it to an absolute extreme.
It's a masterclass in separating the assumption of demand from the reality of demand.
So take us back. This started around 2014, right?
Right. It began with college students at Stanford, including Stanley Tang. And the key thing here is they didn't start by writing code or raising venture capital.
What did they do?
They started by walking into town and talking to small business owners. Tang noted they spoke to roughly 150 to 200 local merchants before they wrote a single line of back-end logic.
Just pounding the pavement.
Literally just asking people about their day.
And they found a shared agony, which is the bedrock of any real company. They found a macaron store owner in Palo Alto who was deeply frustrated.
Yeah, she was turning away business.
She had customers who wanted her pastries delivered, but she had no infrastructure. She couldn't afford a delivery driver, she didn't have refrigerated trucks, and she obviously couldn't leave the counter herself.
Right.
And as Tang and his co-founders kept interviewing these 200 businesses, the echo was deafening. Everyone was saying delivery is a huge pain. There are no good solutions for local, on-demand logistics.
Now, it is very easy to look back now in an era where you can get a single cup of coffee delivered to your door in 20 minutes and think that delivery was an obvious problem to solve.
Right. It feels inevitable now.
But at the time, Tang himself questioned it. He thought, if delivery is such a universal pain point, why hasn't a major player solved it already?
Which is a terrifying question for a startup founder.
It is. The natural assumption is that it's just an impossible logistical nightmare, or that consumers actually won't pay the premium required to make the math work.
So the default instinct for an engineering team hearing that problem would be to build the infrastructure first.
Right.
You assume you need to buy a small fleet of vehicles, secure commercial insurance, spend 6 months building a complex proprietary dispatch algorithm to ensure the drivers take the most efficient routes.
But that is the trap of the perfectly scaled machine.
Yes.
You spend millions of dollars building a massive infrastructure to test a totally unproven hypothesis.
But Tang and the team didn't do that.
No, they executed an intellectual pivot here. They treated the entire business strictly as a localized experiment.
An experiment.
Right. They recognized a macro trend. The proliferation of smartphones meant almost anyone could instantly become a node in a localized logistics network.
Because everyone suddenly had GPS in their pocket.
Exactly. But before they built an app to coordinate those nodes, they had to answer the most terrifying question in business.
Which is?
Will the consumer actually type their credit card number into a computer to have this specific food brought to their house?
And the way they tested that is legendary. It is the ultimate facade.
It's brilliant.
They threw up a landing page called paloaltodelivery.com. Tang said it took them less than an hour to build.
An hour.
An hour. And they didn't even have an API pulling menus from restaurants. They physically found PDF menus of local restaurants and just uploaded the files to the site.
Just static PDFs.
Static PDFs. And at the absolute bottom of this incredibly basic web page, they placed a single Google Voice phone number.
That's it.
That was the entire multi-billion-dollar prototype, a web page, some PDFs, and a phone number.
It's a digital storefront masking a purely analog reality.
Yes.
To the consumer browsing the web, it looks like a functioning business. But there is absolutely zero software running behind that Google Voice number. It is a hollow shell waiting for a signal.
And then the signal comes, the phone rings, someone actually wants an order of pad thai.
This is the critical juncture.
Yes.
This is a moment where the friction becomes real.
Because now they have a live customer expecting a service, but they have no drivers, no back-end dispatch system, and no automated payment gateway.
Tang described how they sat there, staring at each other in the dorm room, and debated for about 10 seconds.
The famous 10-second debate.
Right. They literally asked each other, should we actually go do this? Should we get in the car, drive to the restaurant, order the pad thai, pay for it, and drive it to the stranger's house? Or should we just ignore the phone, admit this is too hard, and go get ice cream?
It's so human. But that 10-second debate is the crucible of entrepreneurship.
It really is.
By choosing to abandon their evening, skip the ice cream, and physically deliver that pad thai themselves, they committed to a deeply unscalable, highly manual reality.
But consider the intelligence they extracted from that single drive.
What did they learn?
Tang explicitly noted that acting as their own drivers was the only way they truly understood the physics of the delivery process.
Right, because you can't code an algorithm to account for finding parking at a crowded apartment complex unless you've actually circled the block for 10 minutes sweating over cold noodles in the passenger seat.
Exactly. You can't calculate the friction of a restaurant being out of an item unless you've had to stand at the counter and manually text the customer for a substitution.
Doing the manual dispatching themselves forced them to figure out exactly what variables their automated routing software would eventually need to weigh.
They were embodying the algorithm. You cannot write code to optimize a system you do not intimately understand.
But even as they started getting more orders, their quote-unquote system remained incredibly fragile. They didn't rush to build custom software.
No, they just stacked existing consumer tools on top of each other in ways those tools were never designed to be used.
Let's pull apart this duct tape architecture because it is mind-blowing that a company scaling this fast was running on this stack.
It's terrifying, honestly.
To keep track of incoming orders, they used a single shared Google Doc.
Just a spreadsheet.
A spreadsheet. To figure out where their contracted drivers were in the city, they forced the drivers to share their location on Apple's Find My Friends app.
Which is meant for, like, checking if your spouse is at the grocery store.
Exactly. And to actually process the credit cards, they use Square, the little white card reader dongle you plug into a phone, typically used by people selling jam at a farmer's market.
It is a breathtakingly precarious tower of cards.
So fragile.
You have an order database that is literally a collaborative text document, highly vulnerable to someone accidentally hitting delete.
Right, one wrong keystroke and the business stops.
You have a routing dashboard that requires employees to opt in to a family tracking surveillance feature, which drains their personal phone batteries. And you have a payment gateway designed for low-volume, face-to-face retail being used as the financial backbone of a high-velocity, decentralized delivery network.
And the tension here is that it was working too well.
That was the problem.
They were moving so fast, processing so many rapid $15 to $20 transactions from all over town through that single Square account that the system snapped.
Square abruptly shut their entire account down.
They froze the funds.
Because they suspected DoorDash was a money laundering operation.
Which is just a fascinating look into the blind spots of automated security.
It really is. Because Square's algorithms were designed to look for anomalous behavior.
Sure.
If you have a brand new account with no established retail history, suddenly processing a barrage of rapid, low-value transactions from seemingly random geographic locations.
To an algorithm that looks highly illegal.
Exactly. To a risk model that looks exactly like a financial crime called microstructuring or smurfing.
Right. And for anyone listening who isn't a forensic accountant, smurfing is when criminals take a massive pile of illicit cash and break it up into tiny, innocuous transactions, like $15 at a time, to avoid triggering the $10,000 reporting threshold at banks.
Which is exactly what DoorDash's transaction ledger looked like.
DoorDash, by virtue of running an incredibly fast, unscalable startup on a consumer tool, had accidentally perfectly mimicked the behavior of a money laundering cartel.
The tool broke because it was being subjected to pressures it was never engineered to withstand.
Yeah.
And while DoorDash was only saved because one of the co-founders, Tony Xu, happened to have previously worked at Square.
Oh, that's right. He had to urgently email former colleagues to unblock the account.
Right. But the lesson here is profound. The breakage itself is the validation.
If you are sitting there listening to this and you're frustrated because the internal tool you built for your team is constantly crashing or your spreadsheets are breaking under the weight of the data, you should actually be celebrating.
You really should.
The failure of the duct tape proves the velocity of the demand. If your Google Doc isn't catching on fire, you don't need to spend 6 months building a custom SQL database yet. You haven't earned the right to scale.
That is a critical transition point. The friction of the broken system forces you to decide what to actually build.
Which brings us to the deepest analytical layer of this deep dive.
The tension between engineering theory and business survival.
Exactly. We have to look at how founders actually architect this transition, specifically the war between writing clean code and securing customer love.
This is a huge engineering dilemma.
Yeah, it is. If you have any sort of technical background, or if you manage technical teams, you know there is an overpowering, almost religious instinct to build beautiful, clean, robust code.
It is hammered into you in university.
You do not write duct tape code. You do not implement hacky workarounds because that creates technical debt.
Right. You are borrowing time from the future.
And eventually that messy code will cause catastrophic bugs.
The theory of technical debt is sound, but only in a mature ecosystem.
Right.
Walker Williams from Teespring argued that in the crucible of an early-stage startup, that instinct for perfection is actively dangerous.
It's a clash of paradigms.
It violates every fundamental rule of computer science, but it perfectly obeys the ultimate law of early business: speed of iteration over architectural purity.
Because the product you launch with today is almost certainly not the product you are going to need in 6 months.
Or even 6 weeks.
Yeah.
If you spend 3 months architecting a perfectly scalable, cloud-redundant foundation for a new feature, and it turns out the customers don't even want that feature.
You haven't just wasted time.
No, you have burned the limited runway of your company's life.
And the example Teespring provides here actually made my heart rate spike as someone who understands databases.
It's a stressful story.
Very. Teespring had a massive opportunity. A couple of large enterprise-level nonprofits came to them and said, "We love your platform, we want to run massive campaigns, but we need specific fundamental features that you currently do not have."
Now, let's look at the traditional responsible engineering approach to that request.
Okay, what does the textbook say?
The textbook says the team sits down, specs out the requirements, plans a massive refactoring of their core platform, ensures the new enterprise features integrate seamlessly with the existing user base without breaking anything, puts it through rigorous QA testing, and deploys it maybe 4 to 6 weeks later.
Which is completely logical.
Very logical.
But Williams explains that his co-founder, Evan, didn't do that.
Not at all.
Evan looked at the request and realized they didn't have 6 weeks to capture these massive clients. So he literally custodied the entire database.
This is just wild.
He duplicated their production environment and built a completely parallel, isolated version of Teespring. He brute forced the specific enterprise features into this isolated clone over a single weekend.
I really want to emphasize how much of a mortal sin that is in software engineering.
It's a nightmare.
Duplicating a live database creates an immediate, terrifying nightmare of data integrity.
Because now you have 2 separate platforms running simultaneously.
Yes. If a user updates their password on platform A, it doesn't update on platform B. Transaction histories are siloed. If a bug is fixed on the main site, it has to be manually patched on the clone.
It is the definition of unscalable chaos.
An engineering professor would fail you on the spot.
But from a purely survivalist business perspective, it is absolute genius.
It is brilliant because it isolated the risk and accelerated the learning. They handed this cloned, custom tool to the enterprise nonprofits almost immediately. Those clients onboarded, launched their campaigns, and immediately started generating significant revenue for Teespring.
And more importantly, Teespring used that isolated environment as a laboratory.
Exactly.
They watched exactly how the nonprofits used the new features. They learned which buttons were ignored and which tools were critical.
They let the clients test the messy prototype in the real world.
Yes. And only after they had proven the financial value of those features and confirmed exactly how they needed to work, did they take the time to formally code them into the main platform.
What would have been a month of highly speculative, blind engineering was replaced by 3 days of targeted hacking and a week of paid observation.
It fundamentally changes how you view planning.
It does. Williams offered a great heuristic for this kind of growth. He said you only worry about the next order of magnitude.
Meaning what?
Meaning, if you currently have 10 users, you do not sit in a boardroom agonizing over the server architecture required to host 1 million users. You dedicate 100% of your cognitive load to figuring out how to get to 100 users.
Right.
When you hit 100, then you engineer the systems required to reach 1,000.
It's a philosophy of forced myopia. You intentionally blur out the distant horizon so you can run as fast as possible on the ground right in front of you.
You have to push the system until it physically breaks.
And that breaking point has a very specific cultural resonance in tech. Let's look at the fail whale era.
Oh, the fail whale.
A term originally coined for Twitter's constant crashes, but deeply applicable to Teespring's early days.
Yes.
Williams described agonizing, months-long stretches where their site would crash every single night. The servers simply could not handle the load of growing traffic.
It was relentless.
The entire founding team would go to sleep with their laptops open next to them and their phones on maximum volume tucked underneath their pillows.
Waiting for the alarm.
Waiting for the automated alarms to go off, signaling a server crash. They would jolt awake at 3 a.m., frantically restart the systems, verify the databases hadn't corrupted, and try to go back to sleep.
Now, on paper, a platform crashing every single night is a catastrophic failure.
If you are an investor reading that in a report, you panic.
You pull your funding, but within the context of early-stage survival, it is a bizarre badge of honor.
It proves your demand is radically outstripping your supply.
Exactly. But more importantly, it forces the founders into an incredibly vulnerable position. It forces them into what we should call the crucible of customer service.
Let's talk about that crucible.
Yeah.
Because Williams stated that until Teespring was generating roughly $130,000 to $140,000 a month in revenue, he and his co-founder managed absolutely all of the customer service themselves.
Every single email.
Every single complaint. And he acknowledged there is a massive, almost overwhelming instinct to outsource that pain.
Of course there is. You want to hire an intern or a virtual assistant to shield yourself from the anger of your users.
Because reading hate mail about the code you just spent 80 hours writing is psychologically destructive.
It hurts.
If the site crashes at 3 a.m. and a transaction drops, the founder is the one reading the furious email the next morning from a mother whose charity fundraiser was ruined.
But that psychological destruction is necessary.
Why?
That instinct to build a wall between the creator and the consumer must be aggressively suppressed. When the founder is the one answering the tickets, the abstraction between the code and reality evaporates.
You can't hide behind a dashboard.
You cannot dismiss a software bug as low priority when the human consequence of that bug is screaming at you in your inbox. It forces a level of empathy and urgency that no outsourced support center can ever replicate.
And the strategic advantage of absorbing that pain is incredible.
It really is.
Williams noted a fascinating psychological flip. When a user is furious and they send a blistering email, they expect an automated corporate non-response.
Right, they expect a robot.
But when they get a reply 20 minutes later and they realize they're talking directly to the founder of the company who is apologizing, taking ownership, and manually fixing their specific problem, the dynamic completely shifts.
The anger converts into loyalty.
Exactly. Those frustrated users often become your fiercest, most vocal champions. They will forgive the unscalable, duct-taped technology because they are experiencing a hyperscalable level of human empathy.
Consider the underlying mechanism here. Doing things that don't scale isn't just about surviving technical debt. It is about intentionally manufacturing an exceptional, highly unusual experience that a massive corporation cannot physically replicate.
Right. A multinational logistics conglomerate cannot have its CEO answer a support ticket at 3 in the morning.
They literally can't.
They cannot have their lead engineer duplicate a database over the weekend for a single client.
Yeah.
But DoorDash could. Teespring could. That lack of scale is an asymmetric advantage. It allows you to be human in a space where everyone else is forced to be a machine.
It's your greatest weapon.
Okay, we have dismantled the illusion of the perfectly scaled tech stack. We've seen the raw reality of Find My Friends dispatching duplicated databases and 3.0 AM server crashes.
We've covered a lot of ground.
But there is one final frontier of the startup mythology that we have to tear down, and that is the illusion of the press.
Ah, the media narrative.
Yes. Justin Kan, the founder of Twitch and Justin.tv, provides an absolute masterclass in the source material regarding the deeply unscalable reality of public relations.
Public relations is arguably the most misunderstood element of building a business.
No misunderstood.
There is a pervasive, almost romantic myth among engineers and creators that the press operates as a pure meritocracy.
If you build it, they will come.
Exactly. The assumption is that if you write objectively brilliant code, or if you build a fundamentally superior widget, journalists will naturally discover your genius and write glowing profiles that propel you to success.
Kan shatters that myth entirely.
He destroys it.
Press coverage does not happen through spontaneous discovery. Journalists are not roaming the earth, turning over rocks to find the most elegant supply chain software.
They just aren't.
PR is a heavily manufactured, manually engineered outcome, and Kan makes a crucial point. If you do not have a specific, highly targeted business goal for your press coverage, engaging with the media is a total waste of time.
Right.
Just wanting to be in the news so you have an article to send your mom to prove you have a real job that is not a business strategy.
Blind coverage is entirely useless. You must wield the press like a surgical instrument.
And Kan provides brilliant contrasts from his own portfolio of companies to illustrate this, doesn't he?
He does. Let's look at how he manipulated the narrative based on the specific needs of different startups. When he launched SocialCam, which was essentially an early video version of Instagram, his primary goal was not necessarily to get millions of users on day one.
What was the goal?
His immediate survival goal was to attract Silicon Valley venture capitalists to fund the company.
Therefore, he aggressively targeted the tech press, TechCrunch, Silicon Valley blogs. The audience reading those specific blogs wasn't necessarily his end user, but it was the exact concentration of wealthy investors he needed to secure his capital.
Precisely. But contrast that with his strategy for another company he founded, Exec.
Right, the cleaning service.
Exec was an on-demand local cleaning and errand service operating exclusively in San Francisco. If Exec got a massive, glowing write-up in a national tech blog, it would be utterly useless.
Right, because a tech enthusiast reading that blog in New York or London cannot order a cleaner for an apartment in San Francisco.
Exactly. The geographic mismatch renders the national press worthless.
So for Exec, Kan completely ignored the national tech echo chamber. He targeted the San Francisco Chronicle and highly localized city blogs. He needed actual paying customers in a specific zip code, so he went to the publications those specific people read over their morning coffee.
And then consider the launch of Twitch.
Oh, Twitch is a great example.
The live streaming platform for gamers that eventually sold to Amazon for nearly $1 billion. When Twitch launched, it didn't need the local San Francisco paper. And initially, it didn't even need mainstream tech press. Mainstream tech writers didn't understand the appeal of watching other people play video games back then.
They thought it was weird.
They did. Twitch needed hardcore gaming influencers and broadcasters to adopt the platform. So Can targeted niche industry trades, game development blogs, and esports forums.
He understood that the readership of the publication is the actual product you are buying with your PR efforts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You must align the demographic of the publication's audience with your immediate, unscalable survival goal.
So once you know who you are targeting, how do you actually hack the system? How do you manufacture this momentum if journalists aren't naturally looking for you?
Can breaks down the tactical reality, and it's essentially just a highly unscalable sales funnel.
It's just manual labor again.
It is. You don't just draft a press release and blast it to a generic tips at email address and pray. You have to engineer warm introductions.
How does that work?
You find an entrepreneur who recently got covered by the specific reporter you want, and you ask that entrepreneur for an introduction.
Because that leverages the transitive property of trust. The reporter is overwhelmed with cold pitches. But if a founder they already respect introduces you, they assume you have been vetted.
Exactly. And the mechanics of the pitch itself are aggressively pragmatic. Can advises that you must give reporters a week of lead time. You cannot email a journalist on a Tuesday afternoon saying, "We launch on Wednesday morning. Please write 1,000 words about us."
You have to respect their editorial calendar.
Right. And most importantly, you have to do their job for them.
This is the most cynical yet brilliant part of his advice. You literally do their work for them. Can says you send them an email with a meticulously organized press kit. You provide the high-resolution photos already cropped. You provide the embedded video links. You give them a bulleted list of the exact problems your company solves.
You literally tell them how to spell your co-founder's name to avoid typos.
You bold the specific statistics you want them to quote. You remove every single ounce of friction between them reading your email and them hitting publish on an article.
You are reducing the cognitive load of the journalist to near zero.
Yeah.
And if you want to bypass the traditional pitching process entirely, you engineer what is essentially a theatrical stunt.
Oh, the stunts. Timmy introduced this concept by highlighting another startup from the Y Combinator Accelerator program, a payments company called WePay.
This is a classic story.
It is. At the time, PayPal was the dominant force in online payments, but they were facing a massive public backlash. They were in the news constantly because their security algorithms were freezing developer accounts and locking up small business funds without warning,
Causing immense frustration for everyone.
PayPal was the giant, and everyone was angry at them. So WePay, a tiny competitor, decides to hijack that narrative. They go to a massive developer conference that PayPal is hosting.
And they don't just hand out flyers.
No, they procure a massive, literal flock of ice. Hundreds of pounds of ice. And frozen solid inside this giant block of ice is real money. Hundreds of dollars in cash, physically trapped in the ice.
It's so good.
They drop this massive block right outside the front doors at the PayPal conference where every single attendee and tech journalist has to walk past it.
The visual metaphor is perfectly calibrated.
Yeah.
PayPal freezes your money, we don't.
It is brilliant theater.
Yeah.
You literally cannot walk past a 500-pound block of ice with cash frozen inside it and not take a photo. It forces coverage.
It creates an inescapable visual anchor for the existing narrative. WePay, as an unknown startup, would never have been written about on their own merit that week.
Right.
But by executing that deeply unscalable, highly physical stunt, they inserted themselves directly into the dominant industry conversation.
I have to play devil's advocate here, though.
Go for it.
If we look at the reality of dropping ice blocks and spoon-feeding pre-written quotes to exhausted journalists,
Yeah.
isn't PR just a massive vanity metric? If you are faking the momentum, are you actually building a sustainable business? Does being on the front page of TechCrunch actually mean you have product market fit?
Can is brutally, refreshingly honest about this exact danger. He explicitly states that, yes, PR is largely a vanity metric.
It is.
It releases dopamine. It feels incredible because your peers see you in the news, your investors send you congratulatory emails, and it creates the illusion of success. But being in the news does not mean your code works. It does not mean your unit economics are profitable. And it certainly does not mean you are retaining the users who click through the article.
It's a localized bootstrap.
That is the perfect term for it. It is an unscalable lever you pull to acquire your first 100 or maybe 1,000 users. But you cannot sustain a business on media hype.
The public gets exhausted by narrative very quickly.
Very quickly. If the product behind the ice block is broken, The users will churn immediately.
Which perfectly explains Khan's final warning on the subject. Hiring a PR firm in the early days is a staggering waste of capital.
Oh, massive waste.
Startups will routinely burn $5,000 to $20,000 a month retaining an external PR agency because they think the agency possesses magical access to the media.
But they don't. Connor argues that PR firms can only facilitate logistics. They can manage the email lists and schedule the interviews, but they cannot invent a compelling narrative if the founders don't have one.
Right. If you, as the creator, do not fundamentally understand why your company is interesting, paying an agency $10,000 a month will not magically make the world care about you.
You have to do the unscalable work of defining your own story first.
If we synthesize everything we have dissected today, from the grueling 100-hour grinds to secure $1,000 at Teespring, to Stanley Tang delivering pad thai to test a Google Voice number for DoorDash, to Justin Kan engineering hyper-targeted press stunts,
The overarching truth of the modern digital empire is undeniable.
it is. The foundation of massive automated global scale is always forged in intensely unscalable, highly manual, and deeply messy human effort.
It requires a complete paradigm shift for anyone trying to build something new.
Because we are culturally conditioned to worship efficiency.
We really are.
We read books on how to optimize our workflows, automate our tasks, and build systems that run themselves. But Lecture 8 teaches us that seeking efficiency in the beginning is chasing a mirage. Doing things that don't scale is not a penalty you suffer for being small and underfunded.
I'd actually push that further.
Yeah.
It is your most lethal weapon.
Yeah.
It is the ultimate asymmetric advantage. The one thing that massive, established billion-dollar corporations physically cannot afford to do is operate without scale.
True.
A multinational conglomerate cannot have its executives hand-delivering food to test a feature. They cannot have their lead engineers duplicate production databases to close a single mid-tier client. Their massive scale is their prison. Your absolute lack of scale is your freedom. It grants you the ability to learn at a microscopic, intimate level that the giants just cannot access.
But that leaves us with a critical, almost dangerous question to end on. We have firmly established that doing things that don't scale is the secret engine of early survival. It is the duct tape that gets the rocket off the launch pad.
Right.
But if you are sitting there running your project on shared spreadsheets and late-night panic, consider this. At what precise moment does an unscalable advantage mutate into a toxic liability?
That is the paradox of growth. It is the ultimate tightrope walk of leadership.
Exactly. If your entire company culture is built on heroic manual fixes.
If your team is conditioned to sleep with their phones under their pillows, waiting for the servers to inevitably crash.
Yes. If you are used to duplicating databases instead of writing scalable architecture, how do you eventually transition? How do you safely assassinate the very scrappy, duct-taped habits that save your life without accidentally killing the empathetic, fast-moving soul of your company?
Because eventually, the duct tape will dry out and snap.
It has to. Eventually, you push that boulder to the top of the hill, and if you are still trying to push it manually when it starts rolling down the other side, it will crush you.
Recognizing the exact moment you must abandon the unscalable for the automated is what separates the companies that survive from the companies that define an era.
Something to heavily weigh as you look at your own projects, your own ambitions, and your own duct tape. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Stay intensely curious, question the sanitized mythology of the overnight success, and never be afraid to get your hands dirty and push the boulder yourself.